Welcome to Touch Technology Review. Today, I'm going to show you how to start a podcast on your iPhone. As you're probably already aware, podcasts are becoming more and more popular with over 1 million podcasts and 30 million episodes as of April 2020. Apple Podcasts alone feature more than 500,000 active podcasts, including content in more than 100 languages. And here are some more interesting stats. In 2020, 55% of all US homes listen to a podcast this year, which is up from 51% 2019. 24%, and that's 68 million people in the US, listen to a podcast on a weekly basis. Podcast listeners listen to an average of 7 different shows per week, which is up from 5 in 2017. The most popular genre was comedy, followed by education, then news, and finally, podcast listeners more likely to follow companies and brands on social media. So if you already have a big following on social media, if you're an Instagram influencer, for example, a YouTube creator, or if you're new to the game and have an awesome idea for a show, then starting a podcast is a great way to increase your profile and build your brand. Creating and distributing a podcast used to be pretty complicated, but now you can do it all with minimal equipment and an iPhone, and perhaps the best app to do this is Anchor. It's a free app which you can download on the App Store, and I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. Anchor does everything for you, including capturing the recording, allowing you to edit the audio and add music and sound effects, and it even uploads and distributes your podcast to the Anchor platform along with other leading podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and even Google Play. Now, I'm going to give you a hands-on look in just a moment as we create our first podcast together. But before we get into it, let's just talk a little bit about audio and how to optimize the quality of your vocal recording. The audio quality is more important than ever when you're podcasting, as a listener doesn't have any visuals to rely on or be distracted by. So you want to make sure that your audio is as crisp and clear as possible. You can use the microphone in the iPhone and it's going to sound just fine, but you need to consider some basic principles in audio before you do so. The main one is that the closer you get to the microphone, the less room noise and echo, and the further away you are, the less present and clear the vocal will be. So if using the built-in microphone, make sure that it's no more than 30 to 50 centimeters away from your voice. If you can use the headset that came with your phone, you should get an even better sound on your podcast. For those of you with pro gear lying around, you can even plug in a microphone into your iPhone for more optimal sound. For example, I have a professional Rode NT1 Studio condenser, which I've connected to my iPhone with the help of the Apple Lightning to USB camera connector that allows me to interface my Zoom audio recorder with the iPhone. I can then plug in the Rode NT1 into the XLR port on the Zoom audio interface, and Anchor is now using this input as the audio source for an entirely professional audio production. It doesn't even have to be this complicated. If you're in the market for a microphone, you can get a USB microphone such as the Rode NT USB or Podcaster USB or something like the Audio-Technica AT2020 USB. And these allow you to connect straight into the Lightning to USB camera adapter without the need to add an audio interface like the Zoom H6 that I've used here today. So now I get the benefit of using the Pro Gear for optimal audio quality with the convenience of an all-in-one app that makes podcast production and distribution a breeze. Now, for those of you without any additional microphones, don't worry. You can just speak into the iPhone, as I mentioned earlier, and provided you're close enough to the audio, it should sound absolutely fine. So now that we have our audio set up, let's get started and make our first podcast. So once you've downloaded the app, you simply need to create a new account with Anchor by entering in your email address, a username and password, and come up with a podcast show name. And this is very important because this will be the name that people can search your podcast under. So make sure it's related very closely to your brand or your podcast concept. If you can't get the exact name that you're after, try a variation and get it as close as you possibly can. Now, once you've done all that, simply tap on the tools icon and press on the record button to start your recording, and you can start recording your podcast. If you make a few mistakes here and there, that's fine. You can go and edit that recording later on. So continue with the recording until you reach the end of the podcast. Tap on the stop button, then tap on the trim button. And the trim section allows you to trim the in and out points of your podcast. And once you're happy with that, tap on save. And then you can go ahead and add some background music. There's a decent selection of tracks that you can add as your background music. Tap on the play button to preview. And once you've found the audio track that you like, tap on the plus button to add it to your recording. And once you've done that, save your segment down and add the recording to the episode. You can continue to build your podcast by recording multiple takes, and these will then appear as the final podcast edit. But before we do that, let's have a look at some of the other tools that we can use to help build our podcast and make it more interesting. There's an interlude section, which allows us to create intros and transition scenes in between our podcast edit. So you can use any of these interlude sounds to create an interesting transition in between different sections of your podcast. The next is sounds, where you can add sound effects. And the next section is called Your Podcast, where you can see a list of all of your published podcasts and also your draft podcasts. You can go in and have a look at the stats, including the listeners overall, and also where the listeners came from Apple Podcasts to Anchor and Google Podcasts. The other powerful feature of Anchor is the ability to invite friends to join your podcast. So in order to do that, tap on Invite Friends in the Tools section. And if your friends already have the Anchor app, tap on the Anchor Friends option. The app will send them a message and notify them that you want to start a podcast with them. Otherwise, you can send a standard text message or copy the link and send it via email. They can then tap on this link to be invited into your podcast, and you can now have a podcast with multiple guests. It's really that simple. And by the way, Anchor isn't just a podcast creators platform. If you tap on the Discover icon, you can find podcasts from other creators all around the world. You can do a search for particular podcast names that you might be looking for, or browse through the various categories of podcasts. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit me up with a like and consider subscribing to the channel so you'll be notified of up and coming video releases. And by all means, if you have any questions about the content you've seen here today, put those questions in the comments box below and I'll endeavor to get back to you as soon as possible. See you on the next one. Bye for now.